I'm Kathy Platt, a freelance writer, married, with 2 adult daughters, and I live in Beaumont, Texas. Last May, we lost my 99-year-old father to COVID-19, but we had been losing him for the past 6 years, to mental confusion and decline, and to the influence of a new family who came into his life when he married again at age 93, an exploitation that we continue to experience. What our family experienced as the progressive and profound overthrow of my father's mind, will, emotions, and devotion is not considered abuse if the elder himself complies with or denies the exploitation. Our family's loss of my father's trust and promises to us can be described as just bad luck because of new choices he freely made in the 10th decade of his life, or as something more obvious and pernicious, although easier denied than taken seriously and investigated. My father had been a widower for 2.5 years, living independently in a retirement community in Pennsylvania, when he married again at age 93 to another resident of the community. His new wife was 96, had 4 adult children, and was financially independent. I was my father's only living child and heir. Despite living 1,500 miles away in Texas, I was close to my father and was named as his primary beneficiary in his will and in all his life insurance policies. I was also named as his executor and power of attorney, with my husband named as trustee. In fact, in the months before his 3rd marriage at age 93, my father voluntarily assured me that nothing in his or the new wife's wills would change, but each would preserve their respective estates for their own heirs and keep their bank accounts separate. I seriously considered if I should know or do anything to guarantee my father's verbal assurances. Unfortunately, my father's attorney could not advise me, so I simply trusted my father's word to me. Although my father's behaviors towards our family began to change within the first year of marriage, I did not discover until much later how much his agitation and confusion belied dramatic changes in his life, will, and finances. Only once did my father ever call me for help, demanding to know what was happening to his money, which was disappearing. When I flew up to Pennsylvania to investigate, he quickly denied any problems at all. Nonetheless, I discovered several disturbing documents that contradicted all my father's promises to me and our family, changes he denied when I asked him about them. Within the first 10 months of this new marriage in their 90s, my father and his new wife had drawn up new wills, setting up a trust for the new wife, making her primary in his will, making me contingent, while preserving her estate fully intact for her own children. My father had changed his attorney to the attorney used by the new wife and her family. He removed me as executor, removed my husband as trustee, replacing us with the professionals used by the new family, including the family's accountant. When I questioned my father about these changes, he denied them outright, although I had now seen the new documents. Within a week after arriving home in Texas, I received a letter from my father's new attorney revoking my power of attorney. Years later, I discovered that he named his 98-year-old wife as his primary agent, replacing me. Over time, I discovered that my father also moved all his investments over to the accountant used by the new wife and her family, and eventually commingled his bank accounts with the new wife, controlled by her middle daughter. At my father's death, I discovered that I had been replaced by his new wife as primary beneficiary on his largest life insurance policy. Several smaller policies in which I'd also been named primary simply disappeared. The official story is that my father independently changed his mind when he married again at 93 and freely made all these changes to take care of his new wife. The official story, of course, completely misses what was happening in my father's mind and emotional life, and going on behind the skirts of his new wife. My father's elderly wife was not only not capable of acting as his agent, his wife's middle daughter had been managing her mother's affairs for many years. Much later, I discovered that early in the marriage, this stepdaughter to my father began managing my father as well, at first unofficially, as a surrogate agent, but progressively assuming more and more influence over him, making both financial and medical decisions for him, and distancing him from me. Although I sensed the stepdaughter's incursion and felt her pushback, I had no clear idea in those early years how extensive her control and influence would become. My father, now 97, and his wife, now 100, had been living together in independent living for 4 years when a crisis occurred. The retirement facility insisted on moving my father into the secure memory unit for his well-being and safety, and the stepdaughter threatened the facility with a lawsuit not to move my father there. But by this time, my father's cognitive decline was so serious that the facility director and medical staff ignored the stepdaughter's threats and moved my father into memory care anyway. Confronted by the stepdaughter's dangerous interference in my father's life, the director of the facility advised me to petition for guardianship, since my father had revoked my power of attorney 3 years earlier, and I began to work on this long distance from Texas. When the stepdaughter, the accountant, and the attorney learned of my intentions to obtain guardianship, they moved quickly to make the stepdaughter my father's legal agent. Because my father's 98-year-old wife could never have functioned in her capacity as agent, her daughter had unofficially been making medical, financial, and fiduciary decisions for my father anyway. But the thought of my regaining any legal role or authority in my father's life further activated the stepdaughter, accountant, and attorney to take legal steps to make her control legal and permanent. Despite my father's placement in the secure memory unit and testing as incapacitated on the basic mental inventory, the stepdaughter, accountant, and attorney persuaded my father to sign a new power of attorney document, assigning the stepdaughter as his legal acting agent. The facility director was alarmed and immediately notified me, and I, in turn, notified the county ombudsman and Adult Protective Services to investigate, as well as notified the county DA's office for suspected abuses, including financial exploitation. Although the ombudsman seemed alarmed, APS visited my father and reported that he was fine to sign legal documents and reassign his agency to his stepdaughter, even though he was in secure memory care. The DA's office told me that I lacked enough evidence to make any case, despite the fact that the medical director of the facility provided a deposition attesting to my father's complete incapacity to make coherent decisions. For me to challenge this further, or to continue my position for guardianship, would require an elder law attorney, along with the unlimited funds and stamina, to launch a difficult legal contest against the stepdaughter and her professional team, who were already so many steps ahead and proven experts at managing my elderly father and his wife. After gaining this power of attorney, the stepdaughter, along with the accountant and attorney, now had exclusive and unlimited legal access to my father's wealth and investments. The spend-down of his wealth accelerated, and questionable expenditures were made, ostensibly to benefit the new stepdaughter's mother, his wife. But these were expenditures I knew that my father, in his sound mind, would never have approved. As his daughter, I understood this, but had no power to challenge it. During my visits over the years, I had been able to obtain some information about the changes my father was making under this new family and their advisors, but having lost my position as executor, as authorized medical contact, as power of attorney, as primary beneficiary, and the rest, I had no legal standing, authority, or access to request real information. Anything I learned was incidental or shared with me by the director of the facility because she believed me, did not trust the wife's stepdaughter, and feared for my father's welfare. But it was always too little, too late. While all of the changes my father made can and have been explained away as his free will choice to take care of his new elderly wife, this easy explanation entirely misses the overbearing and undue influence of a new family who came in at the end of his life. Across the past 6 years, I have observed too many red flags and suspicious patterns to name here, including behavioral, emotional, and cognitive changes in my father, which placed him squarely in the category of highest vulnerability and risk for exploitation. My father's being turned from fidelity and trust in us, his family of 6 decades, to distrust of us and complete dependence on a new family and their advisors in the 10th decade of his life, is the most salient sign and devastating consequence of the exploitations that occurred after his marriage at 93 until the day of his death at 99 to COVID-19. Incredibly, the exploitations did not end with my father's death, but continue to this day. Our family not only lost our father's once unbreakable trust in us, but we have also lost out on our unpromised inheritance. Meanwhile, my father's wealth, what is left of it, is still being managed by his stepdaughter, who has been given exclusive and unlimited access to it. While the harms my father and our family experienced are real and ongoing, my reports of suspected abuse and my displacement by this new family as my father's heir, agent, and protector were never considered serious enough to investigate.